They crash, explode, burn on airfields, and demonstrate complete incompetence on the battlefield, even though they were supposed to strike fear into the entire Western world and be the flagship of Russian fighter jets. At the same time, you can't completely write it off, because a recent upgrade to these aircraft has allowed them to use Russia's best long-range missiles to date.
Well, the missile is quite effective. Let's just say we've suffered losses from this missile.
However, is that enough to fight not Soviet but Western aircraft? F-16.
With an energetic maneuver, it can simply evade this missile at low altitude.
And are its own capabilities enough to survive encounters with advanced Ukrainian solutions in this war? Such as, for example, GUR drones, which for the first time in history brought down a Russian fighter jet using just a drone. But today, let's talk about the aircraft. The Su-30 and all its modifications. What is this fighter capable of? Why does it keep crashing and exploding in the hands of Russian pilots time and again? What caused the Su's catastrophe as early as November 2025? And also, who would win if the Su-30 were to meet Ukrainian F-16s in a real air battle? We'll talk about all this in the new episode of Arsenal right now. Discussions about Russian Su-30s in the press usually arise not because of successful operations, but due to the numerous incidents involving this fighter. That's what happened this time as well. Another flight, another failure. On November 13th, a Russian Federation Su-30 combat aircraft crashed. The plane crashed in the Republic of Karelia region. Both crew members were killed. The crash occurred in a forested area, reportedly not far from the city airport. The enemy's Telegram channel Flybomber reported that it was a Su-30SM, a two-seat heavy fourth-generation fighter. One of the main theories for the crash is pilot error.
Every Su-30SM aircraft is worth its weight in gold. It's all about the components. They're hard to obtain by circumventing sanctions. Moreover, as far as I know, Su-30SMs as such are either not being produced at all or are produced in extremely limited numbers.
But these planes crashed not only because of pilot errors. For example, this summer the GUR demonstrated that Russian Sukhois now have another threat to fear. Namely, Ukrainian drones, which for the first time in history carried out an operation to destroy a moving military aircraft using a drone. Specifically, the head of the GUR, Kirilo Budanov, clarified in an interview with The War Zone that 3 unmanned Magura V-7 boats took part in the attack, 2 of which fired at the aircraft. At the same time, 2 Russian Su-30SM attack aircraft were destroyed. One of the crews was killed, the second managed to eject. The Russians immediately sent a civilian vessel after him, hoping that Ukraine would not violate the rules of war and would refrain from firing on civilians.
Even though the Ukrainians had plenty of opportunities to destroy this civilian cargo ship along with the Russian military crew, they did not take advantage of them. They saw how the crew was being evacuated. They circled around the crew, who were struggling in the water. But nevertheless, they did not fire a single shot, neither at the cargo ship nor at the crew.
It also seems that the situation regarding which missiles the Ukrainian Magura drones used has become clearer. In particular, a photo appeared online showing a naval drone equipped with an American AIM-9 air-to-air missile. Earlier versions of the Baker were armed with Soviet R-73 missiles.
What is its uniqueness? Well, really it's that this is a surface remote-controlled system. Specifically remote-controlled, this is very important, which shot down a manned object. And if we talk about the cost of the Magura, which is around $250,000 to $300,000, and the cost of a Russian Su-30, which is $40 to $50 million, you can calculate how many times cheaper the means of destruction was compared to the expensive target.
Besides the obvious result, the destruction of Russian aircraft, this attack brought another advantage to the Ukrainian armed forces. The enemy may not be completely suppressed, but they are definitely terrified. Having lost 2 comrades and apparently, after hearing about 2 more who unexpectedly ended up swimming in the Black Sea, you can only imagine the mindset with which they will now fly missions over the Black Sea area.
The crews of Russian military aircraft flying over the Black Sea now fully realize that they are no longer safe. Just because they cannot see us or our advanced weapons on their targeting radars does not mean those weapons are not actually there. And it was precisely these weapons, these types of armaments, that ended up in the sights of their aircraft.
It's not any easier, by the way, for the pilot's command either. After all, even if the radars detect Ukrainian Megers, it no longer automatically means an order will be given to scramble the aircraft. The leadership of the Russian Air Force now understands all too well that it's far from certain the next pilots will get away unscathed.
Every time the Ukrainians launch an operation in the Black Sea, it becomes an extremely difficult choice for Russia. What should they risk losing? Oil and gas platforms, or perhaps some other installations in the Black Sea? Or, for example, their assets in Crimea, because these unmanned boats can also carry drones. In other words, they're like mini aircraft carriers.
Or maybe they'll have to lose another helicopter or a Su-30 SM. However, the Kremlin has no intention of writing off the Russian Sukhoi just yet. On the contrary, at the Vish, Russia has upgraded its Su-30 SM-2 fighter jet to be able to use long-range air-to-air missiles.
The R-37 missiles, long-range missiles with a range of 300 kilometers, were previously carried by two types of aircraft. The standard armament was the MiG-31BM, which carried 4 of these missiles. And as an alternative or additional armament, the main Russian Air Force fighters, the Su-35S, also carried them.
However, in their efforts to promote their military-industrial complex, the Russians, as always, went overboard. The invincible duo, the newest fighter jet paired with one of the world's longest-range missiles, turned out to be one-off prototypes with highly exaggerated capabilities.
Beginning from approximately the years 2021 to 2022, the Russians have established serial production of the new Su-30 SM fighter model. This is the Su-30 SM-2 model, and they have added to it, on the Su-30 SM-2, the long-range R-37M air-to-air missiles, which have a maximum range of up to 300 kilometers, although that range is clearly considered to be exaggerated. According to Ukrainian Air Force sources, the maximum recorded engagement range was actually about 177 kilometers.
However, the desire to reach our pilots from a long distance hasn't gone anywhere. Additional equipment was brought in, which ultimately ended in another failure for Russian aviation.
The Russians tried to use a 50 flying radar planes for this, but as we know, they're no longer in fashion. Now they're taking a break. After 2 of these planes were shot down, the rest have become a rare sight.
But will F-16 fighters be able to respond to the Russians in any way? Experts assure us that they will. Even though, on paper, the long-range race is completely lost, it is still possible to counter 300-kilometer missiles with weapons that have a range of 160 kilometers.
The F-16 does not have any long-range missiles, but it does have medium-range missiles, which are called AMRAAMs. So, if we get these AMRAAM missiles with a range of 160 or 150 kilometers, then yes, the capabilities of the F-16s will be quite comparable to those of Russian fighters armed with long-range missiles.
The question arises, how? However, it's actually quite simple. By mostly operating at low altitudes, Ukrainian pilots even today do not allow themselves to be detected from long distances. In reality, air combat usually begins at a distance of about 150 kilometers, where both types of missiles have enough range, and other characteristics become a priority.
The AMRAAM missile is much more maneuverable and is much more effective at hitting targets than the huge, low maneuverability R-37 missile. In other words, the F-16 can simply evade this missile at low altitude with an energetic maneuver. But Russian aircraft, which typically fly at medium and high altitudes, will not be able to evade the AMRAAM missile.
In addition to maneuverability, the F-16 also outperforms the Russian Su in terms of defensive systems and radar visibility. It
has a very small radar cross-section, so it will be very difficult to detect it even at short ranges. This is a very maneuverable and agile aircraft, and I really hope that it is equipped with a modern, highly effective onboard defense system that will, in practice, jam and disrupt the guidance of Russian-guided missiles.
As a result, if used correctly, an F-16 may prevent an air battle from happening at all.
If the F-16Es continue to operate at low altitudes, flying close to the ground and blending in against the background of the terrain below, then it could turn out that if they also receive long-range missiles, advanced weaponry that can strike targets from a significant distance along with the aircraft themselves, It could turn out that they shoot down the Russian R-37 missile carriers before those even spot, lock onto, and launch their missiles at the F-16S.
Did you like this video? Then don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our Arsenal channel. The link is in the description below the video.
A Russian legend which is considered almost sacred.
I saw American soldiers throwing away their M16 rifles and picking up the Soviet AK-47.
The Kalashnikov assault rifle was a symbol of the USSR. It was drawn in children's pictures, made into plastic toys, and supplied by the tens of thousands to various African and Latin American countries. To this day, it even appears on the flags of some countries.
In some African countries, children are given the name Kalash so that they may inherit the endurance of this weapon, and boys receive a Kalash as a gift as soon as they grow tall enough to match its length.
But the pride of Russia is in fact stolen. The sacred symbol was disgraced by the USSR itself.
Kalashnikov and his invention are one of the myths of the Soviet Union, like Pavka Korchagin, Pavlik Morozov, and all those Panfilov's men.
Who actually created the legendary assault rifle. Why is Kalashnikov a fraud, and why did the Kalash become a legendary weapon? We'll tell you all about this and more in just a moment. OK and its modifications are the most widespread firearms in the world. They are in service in more than 100 countries, and there are over 100 million units of this rifle in existence. Kalashnikov is a whole family of weapons with many modifications, up to the newest K-12, which was adopted by the Russian army in 2018.
Has anyone had the K-12 jammed during shooting practice?
Yeah, that happened.
Mine jammed. Yours jammed? Your rifle jammed? I also saw someone else's jam yesterday. Oh, the warrant officers jammed. There were feeding failures. Do you like the AK-12 rifle? No, sir. You're wrong. This is the best firearm in the world.
But today we're going to talk about a classic, the iconic AK-47, truly a legendary weapon.
Its main advantage is that it's exceptionally durable. Maiso, it doesn't easily break, and with the original rifle you could row, dig, fight, brawl, and shoot.
The reliability of the Kalashnikov is considered its main advantage. Dirt, dust, water, none of that bothers it.
How is that possible? What am I doing? A misfire. We still have a round in the chamber. Maybe now, let's see. It will finally fire. The Kalashnikov will keep working after being tested with water, mud, and sludge. If you have misfires or dirt gets inside, it's enough to just rinse it out.
The Kalashnikov uses a Soviet unitary cartridge of 7.62 caliber. It's slower, less penetrating, but as it turned out during the Vietnam War, more reliable. Of course, the rifle wasn't perfect, but at the time it was a breakthrough model.
The Kalashnikov rifle originally had a particular trait. It wasn't very accurate. That's why the AK-47 had to be equipped right away with a special compensator. A slanted cut that often puzzles people when they look at it. Since then, upgrades aimed at improving its accuracy have continued.
The rifle instantly became iconic, and its designer, Mikhail Kalashnikov, was practically carried on people's shoulders.
Foreigners, when they find out, they say, if you lived abroad, you would have been a multimillionaire by now. Everyone just thinks about those green bills. Aren't there other values?
Mikhail Kalashnikov's invention brought him fame, but it did not bring him wealth. But he was very proud to have been awarded the highest state honors and to have a monument erected in his homeland during his lifetime.
But are these honors and monuments truly deserved? Russian propaganda shouts that they are. But to answer this question, we need to talk a bit about the life of Mikhail Kalashnikov.
According to Soviet legend, Kalashnikov, who was born into a large family as the 17th child, was interested in technology from a young age and had a 7th grade education. In fact, he saw a locomotive for the first time at the age of 17. But in 1930, the Kalashnikov family was dispossessed and exiled to the Omsk region. Soviet biographers preferred not to mention this. Well, in general, before the war, Kalashnikov worked in the field of weapons development. Let me remind you, he had no higher education, he couldn't read blueprints, he only had a 7th grade education. So supposedly Kalashnikov worked in the field of weapons development. So without any of that, before the war, he creates a submachine gun of an unsuccessful design. The conclusion? Not to be adopted for service. It holds no industrial interest.
According to Kalashnikov's biographers, since 1942, the still rather young 23-year-old Misha worked at the Central Scientific Research Testing Range. In 1944, he creates a prototype of a self-loading carbine, which also did not go into mass production. And then, suddenly, in 1947, the legendary Kalashnikov assault rifle is born. It rolled off the assembly line at the Izhevsk machine building plant and was immediately adopted into service. But how did everything happen so quickly? Let's go back 2 years.
In 1945, Nazi Germany capitulates, and from the city of Seoul, the Soviet leadership takes away part of the equipment and documentation from the Heinelgel Arms factory, and everything related to the production of the German assault rifle StG-44 was removed, which by some miracle looks very much like the Kalashnikov assault rifle. In addition to the equipment, the Soviet leadership also took German gunsmiths, led by Hugo Schmeisser.
Schmeisser was, in fact, the creator of the German assault rifle. And again, a miraculous coincidence, they took Schmeisser and his team to Izhevsk. The German specialists arrived in the city at the end of October 1946. They were settled in a large house and they worked, yet another miraculous coincidence, at the Izhevsk factory. They had some kind of special assignment there, everything was classified, but it's not hard to guess what the German gunsmiths were actually working on. What role Mikhail Kalashnikov played is unknown, but the fact remains that the assault rifle was created, if not entirely, then with significant involvement from German specialists, particularly Schmeisser.
Here there is both myth and truth. Kalashnikov, of course, was involved in this grand project to create the rifle that would bear his name, but alongside the new weapon, the Soviet propaganda machine also needed a hero. After the Stalinist repressions and the numerous casualties of the war, the Soviet Union was in acute need of heroes, people who were utterly devoted to Stalin. Kalashnikov was a perfect fit for this role, just like the future cosmonauts or sports heroes of those years. He was a weapons designer of simple working class and peasant origins, the ideal example of a Soviet hero.
What do you think? Who actually created the Kalashnikov rifle? Was it just a coincidence, and did Mikhail Kalashnikov come up with the legendary design on his own? Or did the USSR once again simply take all the credit for itself? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like this video. And be sure to subscribe to our Arsenal channel so you don't miss out on all the most interesting content.